Good day. I hope this presentation finds you well. I hope this presentation helps you grow and feel better. Target of this presentations are persons who are empathic, internalized selves, who have been on the other side of dealing with a person or a cluster B narcissist, or any of the cluster Bs in general and in particular. This presentation is designed for the lay person to be able to speak with a construction to either go to and work with a licensed mental health provider, and so they can start and become their healing. Or if you have not been on the other side of a cluster B, or you're dealing with a difficult personality, it gives you the tool set to understand how their manipulations work. So, a little background on me. I am Morpheus Mirror. I'm an internet marketer, a business owner, military vet. I've lived life. And I've noticed over that life lived, this is the one personality I've always had difficulties with. And in dealing with one, I allowed one into, usually when I would deal with somebody that would be psychologically abusive, I would just simply give them the Heisman, so to speak, and stay at, and keep them at a distance and stay at an observation. This was the first time I did a longitudinal observation, but allowed myself to be enmeshed into the situation. And I even stated to the person I was dealing with, I said that they are psychologically abusive. But at this observation point, they represented other things within my life, so I allowed that to happen so I can sit the observation and then see, okay, where did these patterns play out over my life. I'll be honest, I wish no one to ever have to go through that. But on the other side of it, I knew that this is what I would find. So let us begin. And may you find peace at the end of this, or at least the first steps to it. As we're going to go through either 9 parts: structure of a healthy self, structure of a cluster B narcissistic personality disorder self as observed by me via language, as you know, viewed from an empath's perspective, the emotion to consciousness and happiness archetypes, purpose of the split self in the cluster B, or at least within this narcissist, how the NPD uses that split self, which is where the abuse cycle, and then how the NPD abuse cycle occurs, which is how they abuse the persons in their lives. All of the persons. Not all of the persons realize they're being abused. And some people will think, well, they're receiving all this positivity, but they're actually being abused. The damage it does to the other party, my personal conclusions, and lots of thank you for persons to look for further research, for healing and also knowledge. So without any further ado, let us begin. If you've had your basic psych, you know the self is split into superego, self, and or ego, and id, or id, ego, and superego. Starting with the id being physical self, the protective self. The ego is the first self. I call that maybe the heart self, the true, the child self. Then the superego, which is the external self, and the mind self, so to speak. In a healthy person, in a linear sense, so from a masculine perspective, it's a top-down. From a feminine perspective, you would lay it flat and it'd be concentric circles going outwards. Because feminine or a woman is their network due to the fact that compared to men, women have more connections through their hippocampus than men do. So I also think as we go into more Jung, which is more of a masculine alchemist statement, there's some flipping to go on with that. But that's more metaphysics and all a little more out there. But just in the basics is where we're at, because this is designed specifically to be able to speak to a licensed mental health professional, and it just gives you a grounding space to jump off and move through your healing faster. So we'll stick with the superego, ego, and id. Now, in my observations of this person, what happened is I knew this person years ago in my 20s. I only met them very briefly. It was one of those meet. I was on my walkabout, my youthful 20-year-old walkabout, and I was heading off. So I just met. No romantic connection. So I was the one that got away, so to speak. Fast forward, I go to the military. I go do a lot of things. Facebook comes up, one of the first persons, because I always remembered her because this was like, oh, this was such a cool person. I had fallen for this false self. I didn't know this person well, so the false self was what I knew. And so years go by, connected with Facebook, I was doing my thing, and then I go back on another walkabout that I had planned years ago. Because I had set up my life in my 20s. I had decided, okay, these are the certain things I want to do with my life. These are the 100 things that I wish to try and do. And not so much try, but do with. And these are the experiences of life that I wish to have because nothing's guaranteed, I was to reach a certain age. And I would do these things at different ages. And I've known this since my 20s. And I am now approaching, I'm in my late 40s, approaching my 50s. So time had gone by, and I went on my next walkabout, my quote midlife walkabout. It was going really cool, and I was coming back, and it was funny. The first walkabout I went from the south to the north. This time coming back, I went from north to the south. And I rotate down through it, and it's like, hey dude, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And it was just one cluster. And I didn't understand what was going on. And I felt, okay, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So I was like, I will give it a go. See, I will put that effort out. Full, as an empath, it's full responsibility for self. I am myself. Each individual, ourselves, make note of that. Other people are individuals. Other people are separate from you. It's a very important point. So I go on this walkabout. I meet this person again, and it was just crazy. But the thing is, first they set me up to try to, what I ended up realizing later was to scapegoat me. But I'm extremely driven and stubborn, so I was like, confusion is the purpose of the NPD. I solve puzzles, so all I saw was a puzzle to be solved. So I was having a conversation with this person, and in this conversation I was watching their persons argue with him or herself, and I'd watch her go in and out, and then the child screamed at me, why did I leave her? And I'm like, whoa, that was weird. But it was a psychic scream, and the person didn't realize all their personalities, and I was able to hear her through music. So I got her years ago, It was a type of dance music. So I said, all right. I placed on my Facebook page a course because I said to her, I can understand you through your music. And I could hear her speak through and the arguments in the music. And one personality would jump up and the next personality would argue back and then the child would argue. And it was where the child hid was in the music. Sadly, the superego has taken over the child at this point in this record, at this time in the recording. But what I got out of it, because I could follow the personalities in real time, I was able to come up with a structure of self, at least how they use self, and also a model that works and can predict behavior, or at least if they don't know that you have that model, because of course they'll adapt-ish, but they'll still always, when I say ish, it'll make more sense later. So this is what a structure of a normal, healthy, balanced person. This is non-enlightened. An enlightened person, all three would be one and unique. But as just a regular human being, this is what people look like to me when they are communicating. I can literally watch people in communications and listen to them jump back and forth through their different person of self or their split self. Everyone is like this. In a narcissistic personality, at least with this person, it was a ginormous superego, a very small self-ego or heart, which was the child, and then the it, which I even would talk to the person as these three different persons, and I got to where I had them do music of each different person. Well, the superego is trying not to, right now, presently out of this recording, trying not to allow the child self to actually flow. And it's kind of sad because this person's also now, as I didn't realize at the beginning, is addicted to, she has a lot of money and she's addicted to, she's just an addict actually. And also the drug dealer is trying to keep the self from becoming, because, well, it's a paycheck. That is the truth of evil, I think. So as we go into this is from Power versus Force. One thing, a person with NPD, this is their main emotion, shame. The worst they get up to, the most they get up to is anger, maybe pride. But they're usually just shame, self-hatred and shame. They're miserable human beings. Very low energy. They're trying always to fight that shame. Doesn't matter if it's male or female. I've seen it once we go through this, you'll understand. You can see it with anybody once you have the structure to understand it. The confusion of what they do is the purpose. It is the purpose to create confusion and then create chaos without purpose except to feed. Because they are shamed, they have zero energy, so they have to pull energy from people who are courageous, who are neutral, who are accepting, who are reasonable, who are loving. So they have to pull, well, they have to, but they feel so low of themselves. They pull, and this will make a lot more sense as we continue through, but understand this. And if you wish to read Power versus Force, it's an absolutely great book. Even if you don't agree with everything, the structure is absolutely useful and helpful in just your everyday life. So the purpose of all of this, and so the purpose of what they do is this: to create an emotional lie. Where are you? Underneath is the child, and it's the self. And that superego closes off the self, and then eventually, and sometimes talks to the id to do their bidding, because they're also, in all that shame, they're mostly just terrified human beings. And so what they do, which is this next slide, and this is the meat and potatoes. This is the self as I've been able to map out of of this person, and the structure that I've been able to prove slightly with others. So they just have this ginormous superego, and in the narcissist family structure, there's an invisible child, there's a golden child, and then there's a scapegoat. If you're watching this, more than likely, you're the scapegoat. Or even the visible, but more than likely the scapegoat. What does that mean? The narcissist, or the person with NPD, is a projected self. It's the child's idea, because they stop growing about between, I think my hypothesis, if they're over 1 year old, 1 to 2 years old, then it's NPD, and they stop between 2 to 5. If they're less than 2 to 1, then it has a high probability of being psychopathic on the cluster B spectrum, or anti-personality disorder for the persons. So that way you say it correctly to as in the DSM-5. What they have is a public self and a private self. And you, if it's a good person, an honorable person, or doing stuff, is the public self, or somebody's the public self. As you'll always notice, the NPD person does not have a self. The superego will call down to the id to be angry and protect. That's why you get carrots and sticks with them. And there's always a dialectic, public or private, A or B. You're good or bad. They do the splitting, and this is what they do. As a scapegoat, what they view people as are objects. And if you're an awesome, good person who kicks it butt, takes care of yourself, you're an internalized self, they purposely are trying to, since you're an object, I have all these negative emotions, you have all these positive emotions. The external self is more important. And now there's a lot of women who say, well, that's how we think. Yes and no. The external self is more important. So in order for the external self and the people to say where the center is, you use these two people, the invisible, because people are then put into boxes, masculine and feminine, if they're invisible or if they're a scapegoat, depending on their usage. Public and private. Now, how do they do this? Their main thing, the way they do it, at least with the scapegoat, is anytime you're having a positive emotion, they immediately then try to hammer you with a negative emotion. This hammers your brain chemistry, and it makes you feel bad. And they say, well, since they're externalized, if they feel bad, that must mean I feel good. And so they keep the person that is of highest value in confusion, because you're a non-externalized person is not going to think that way. And that's why they like those targets. Non-externalized person is going to be like, hey, no problems, bro. And even if you have boundaries, there's like, well, they're going to constantly keep hammering these boundaries because that's a strong person and they want to be strong. So therefore, they have to make you look bad or break you so that way they can feel strong. It is they don't really understand self because there is not a self, or it's been shrunk. And two, once they scapegoat you, they have to start all over again. It's just a cycle because that little child that they're trying to destroy is their heart, and their heart will never die. And so this super ego, this false self, is just screaming, trying to stay alive, when it's really just a horrible person. It is the projection of whatever that child was going through. It is the adult of what that child saw. It's the projection of it's the child of what what they think an adult is. In this person's case, this child's mother was a severe drug addict, and the child was trying to tell her dad that her mom was cheating on her, and cheating on him, and that she was doing all these bad things. But the only way she could speak was the mimic of her mom. But you got to imagine, and which was always sexual. And you imagine a 2-year-old trying to talk to her dad in a sexual manner. Doesn't work. So what ends up happening, and then the other thing that was even more insidious is the drug addict mother then enmeshed the entire family in her drug addiction. And then because this person came from wealth, she needed the father to stick around so she can keep money and her addiction going. But she was very good at doing it's called the whipsaw, or as Michelle Neves calls, the look, which is that positive negative whipsawing of the brain and jackknifing it. There's a lot more I could go into, but I just want to leave it at that as far as the observation. And not even just observation, even though this is an observation, yes, this person over time was able to confirm this hypothesis. Now, how do they do this? They use language. It's always an externalized self. So if they give you something, say for instance, this one dude, this the one that's recently just happened. This guy, first he says to me, "Oh, you're smart." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I know that." Okay, I've been smart since I was a child, and that objectively, quote unquote, smart by EQ and IQ. But he was a closeted gay guy, and I'm extremely heterosexual, but I'm also exotic. I have high cheekbones. I have a way of holding myself that does pull people to me, but at the same time, as an introvert, as an empath, I like my space. And as a martial artist, I like my space as well. And he was getting into my space, and I said, "Hey, dude, could you?" And it was obvious to anyone who talks to this guy. Dude has the gay list 1,000 miles away. It's like, "Look, dude, I'm straight. Please respect my space." So next thing he did was then he was going like, "I'm gonna punish you," which is one of the narcissists' main things they do is they poke until you get upset, and then they triangulate. So he was trying to triangulate against this other dude who's a really cool dude. It's like to make him look like the good guy, and to me look like I'm crazy. So I'm in this argument with this guy, the person who was not respecting my boundaries, and he was doing it in front of this other person to try to make me look bad. And I said stop, and I stopped, and I go, "This is what he's doing. He's making me angry because he's using oppositionality. That's their main weapon: oppositionality, triangulation, and poking until you blow up." In my case, it's like, I'd asked him something that anyway, the conversation was, and he was just being oppositional and being silly. I'm like, "What the hell?" And then I looked and I go, "Look, dude, this is what this guy's really doing. He's upset that I told him to stay, And instead of being a man about the fact that he's gay and he needs to respect my space, even nothing to do with the fact of being gay, but just respect my space, he has to try to make me look like I'm just this crazy, angry person now, which makes him look like he's this calm, sane person. And the guy's looking at me and watching him, and because he was not, because the person with NPD at this particular time was not expecting that, he was dumbfounded, because that's exactly what he was thinking. On another point, another guy, same thing. He was poking. He manipulated somebody else. This was a different particular person. So it was a dude. Same thing. That's on the interpersonal point. 1A, and that's their attack structure. What happens is when they attack you, they also do what I call an emotion tagging. So they start saying, so any other persons with NPD, they say, oh, you can dump your emotions on that person too. It's kind of like a pheromone or something. But the main thing is to externalize and take no responsibility for their own emotions and own self. And if you're a person who takes radical responsibility for yourself, they're going to dump all their responsibility onto you. And you're just like, whoa, dude. And they have to keep you confused, and you're the one who's this. Well, they do that on purpose. It is a attack. It is a psychological attack. And they do not attack the average or the weak, because those people get placed into the invisible. If they become enmeshed, they become a golden child, because they have control of them. If they can't be controlled, or you have your own sense of self and you are an awesome person, they dump and scapegoat you. And they just keep doing this pattern over and over and over again. So coming back down to this, back to power versus force as a simple system. This person who's full of shame, who's absolutely miserable internally, doesn't want to do the work to raise their vibration and raise their power and raise their strength, because everything has to be externalized. As long as everything is externalized, it's okay. There's a lot of literature that will say, where people will state that they always have a secondary supply. No, that's how they regulate themselves, A and B, and they sit in the center, or so they think. But they really aren't anything. They're just this projection of a child's idea of what an adult is. They never become human. They never become one of self. So this is the abuse cycle. Idealize, devalue, discard, and hoover, so they can start it all over again. And what's sad is, if you have to listen to their language when you speak to them. You have to look at the actions that they do. The words don't, and the emotion, and more importantly, the emotions. To them, emotions are all that matter. And all of their disdain of emotions and control, if they say they disdain it, that means they don't have it. If they say they don't like it in someone else, they are actually saying it about themselves. It's basically opposite day all the time. Now, what does it do to your brain? It really hammers you. The whole idea is they hammer your parasympathetic nervous system to just destroy you. They are trying to kill you. They are trying to destroy you, because you don't exist. You are an externalized self to them, and you represent the emotions that they cannot have, because to have joy, peace, and happiness, it has to be from an internalized self. It comes from power, not force. And jealousy is all that they're going to come through. So this is a very strong thing. I hope you read it. It's been helpful for me, yoga, to help calm down the parasympathetic nervous system without using drugs or a combination of drugs to slow you down, to slow it down so you can get a 0 point meditation. There is another metaphysical aspect, but I don't wish to go into there at this because this is designed specifically for people to be able to heal. But it is a useful tool, hopefully, for you. So the conclusions I have is this. If you're empathic, you're a caring person, you're an internalized self, you take radical responsibility for yourself, you are a target, and you're an empath, then you become a target for a narcissist because they don't know who they are. And so that's how they find who they are, because they're nothing more than a projected superego of a child. I hope this helps you find peace, or at least gives you a place to sit in the whirlwind that's going around you, if this makes sense to you. Be aware, if the narcissists do read this or watch this, they will try to use this, but here's the thing. They will never take responsibility, because if they take responsibility, that gives power to that child self to grow. And the superego can't have that. Or at least that's what it thinks. It has to keep telling the child it's not strong when the child is actually the stronger, because it would not exist without it. I would like to thank the following persons, or use them as these are the shoulders I stood on. Dr. Sapolsky of Stanford, Dr. Richard Brannon, he has a great one of his videos goes into the structure, but the structure of what happens and how they're trying to get you to blow up. It's great. Michelle Neves, excellent layperson for understanding. Little Shaman Sister, amazing. Simon Sinek, Begin with Why. Dr. Paul Ekman. The reason Dr. Ekman is, if you've seen that TV show Lie to Me, body language, facial expressions, they can't hold it back. They're going to always show it. They are the worst poker players in the world, to be honest with you. No matter how good they are in poker, they're actually, if they're sitting down playing poker, they can learn to do that, but in everyday conversations, look out for what's called the duper's delight, because they're always flashing that. Drawing on the right side of the brain gives you the ability to use both halves of your brain. It opens up your creativity, especially if you're an empath. It helps you really get more centered. Dr. Les Carter, once again, excellent. These are YouTube. This is Wisdom of the Crowd stuff, most of it. Sapolsky has his things with what was the monkeys, where the quote alphas died, and then you start at the beginning of civilization. You go to Stanford to see his. Dr. Les Carter, once again, Surviving Narcissism, I believe his. Sam Vaskin, I believe that may or may not be incorrectly spelled. He is extremely brilliant person. I think he has like a 180 IQ, and he finds balance in explaining his mind and narcissism. And I had already come to the conclusion from observation that it was a network self, but he definitely brings it to a deeper understanding from the inside out. Dr. Romani, that's, watch anything she has. Especially hers about oppositionality. She has 30 Days of Narcissism. An amazing resource. Lisa Romano, once again, this is more for those persons, a layperson who's gone through the narcissistic abuse. She is more East Coast, kind of New Yorker, so So if Little Shama or Michelle, I think all three of those combinations will help you get through. And then, of course, the psychopath checklist, because psychopaths or anti-personality disorder is a cluster B. believe Dr. Amani said that when she was going through grad school, they said A, B, and C clusters. So it's mad, bad, and sad. And if you think of it as a continuum, people get mad, then they get bad, and then they get sad. And then sad is basically back to that I'm worthless, and so it's better to be bad than sad. And from a logical perspective, it kind of makes sense. But these are all adaptations to a really abusive situation, and as opposed to internalizing as an empath possibly would, it's externalizing it. I hope this helps. I hope you find peace, and I wish anyone who's gone through such abuse, because it is abuse. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It is abuse. You were targeted. I wish you well. Find your strength, find your peace, remove yourself from the situation, and if you can't, understand you, not them, are the center of the storm. Thank you.